Could you walk us through, one, like, how does a sleeper cell get formed, right? Where does it get trained? Where do they, how do they end up making it into America? And just kind of walk us through how a cell will make it to a place all the way to where they're on standby to receive activation.
Sure. I mean, we'll talk present day because things have changed just a little bit. Mm-hmm. So how it's working now to do an external operation, if you're Al-Qaeda or ISIS, it really doesn't matter. You go into basically an external operations training camp, okay? And then if you meet muster and you're qualified and you meet the background necessary to go overseas, you kind of move up and keep doing added training and you learn different things. So obviously what they're looking for is that you're patient, you speak good English, you can blend in the West, you have some sort of skill or expertise that would be like a really great cover. So they look for people who can fit that background. It's very similar to the 9/11 hijackers. When you talk about like those Saudis who took care of him, we have to remember these 9/11 hijackers came from wealthy families. They were educated. They knew people within their governments. They went to school with the richest kids. So you have to keep that in mind, that they had personal relationships that might not be with the actual government.
Right.
It's because they grew up in these environments. I worked Kashmir for many years. Well, the Kashmiri terrorists who had wealthy families all went to the same boarding schools, right? So I'm just letting people know, like, that you're missing a little bit of nuances in actually the terrorists' personal relationships with people who are always willing to help them. As you know, it'd be like if someone reached out to me from my middle school, I'd jump to help them. Now, so they go through these camps. The interesting part is, first, what happens if you fail the camp, right? Like, nobody talks about that. So if you're in an Al-Qaeda camp to come to the United States or Europe and you fail, what they do is they move you to an ISIS Khorasan province camp and you get a very short training session. It's maybe like to do stabbings or something like that, maybe make a few IEDs, and they deploy you to Europe. The interesting thing is then Taliban takes your name, they give it to European authorities, and European authorities look for you, wrap you up, or maybe you do an attack click and they miss it, but it looks like the Taliban gave it in advance, but that person was a flunky. Okay.
Yep.
So let's ignore the flunkies. Now, if you're really good, there's different routes you can go. So one route is just the suicide bomber training. So suicide bomber training now is 6 months. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
You're on ecstasy. You learn how to make kind of these invisible bombs, and then you learn how to make a bunch of other IDs. You obviously go through months first of indoctrination. It's a lot. One of the biggest suicide bomber training camps is actually at Camp Chapman Coast Base.
Wow.
They train 2,500 external suicide bombers at a time. So every single one of those 2,500 is leaving Afghanistan. Think about that. It's very scary.
Unbelievable.
Now then, there's other things, and really we just call it advanced urban warfare because that's what they're calling it, but it's like CQB or whatever. Now, these are more like ground assault teams is the best way to put it. So they go through a variety of things. It can be driving training. They learn to make a ton of different IEDs. Obviously, they also are forced to learn the invisible bomb. And then a lot of thing is movement tactics inside buildings. They assault things, like they practice on like complexes, or they pretend it's like a church or a school. Remember, we left our shoot houses there. So I know in your head, you know where exactly they're practicing. Yep. Maybe too, you can explain that to people because it's hard. People talk about weapons left behind, but it's like, no, we left like the best training facilities in the world and they're using that. So that's kind of just your basic, hey, your first year in terrorist camp.
Wow. It's almost like a selection, right? It's like your buds or your selection or whatever it is. And then as you prove your worth and value, now you move into those more significant plot. Right. And
yeah.
And if you were, it's interesting. It almost felt like there was a hierarchy of the plots. Right. There's the initial like stabbing, the killing someone with ramming into people with cars, like in New Orleans. Real basic stuff. And then you have the bomber, which, is singular in nature. But then there's that October 7th Mumbai assault team that works in conjunction. And that for me is just like, whoa, that's another level that, they're going to be able to get really the impact that they're hoping that they receive from those types of operations, for sure.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point, the selection process, because I can just talk through a few things we've seen. In some cases, we've really seen Hamza bin Laden choose someone. And in those cases, it was mostly a second generation terrorist. His father was famous, so he gets chosen for an operation. We have one recently like that. He's leading one in the Middle East. His father was a very, very famous Egyptian, okay? So that's one category. There's another category when you prove yourself, right, on the battle, your proving grounds, and then you move up. And what they're doing in that case, you kind of move up into like an elite class, and you get to meet with Saif al-Adil, who is the mastermind of this homeland plot, very famous Egyptian, former military there. And those are kind of that smaller group, more important. Then there is the piece where people get to meet with Hamza bin Laden. So there has some that got to sit down and be blessed by Hamza bin Laden. We don't know if it's like they have set commanders leading on the ground here. And then obviously, as we know, the airplane suicide bombers have always been special. Osama bin Laden put out his video, the Manhattan Raid video, when he went in and actually chose the 20. So those have always been a top priority. So did Hamza actually meet with them? We're not sure which pockets, but he did sit down and bless some of them. So there are hierarchies. Now, that's just on the Al-Qaeda side. There are also hierarchies on the ISIS side.
Wow.
So ISIS, for the homeland plot, the best ones are chosen by a guy named Rajab Salahuddin. So he's basically the military general for ISIS Khorasan province. But some of them get to meet Sanaullah Ghaffari, the head of it, who blesses them. Now, this is the people who train in Afghanistan. There's also training in Syria, okay? And in Syria has similar pipelines. So there's an ISIS pipeline, and you basically fall under ISIS's military commission. It was Abdullah Maki. If you don't know him, we killed him in a strike in March in Iraq. So he was running that piece of the training pipeline, and he was actually connected to Jabr in New Orleans. So he ran Jabr's cell from Syria. Now then, there's a whole nother pipeline under Abu Muhammad al-Julani, the new president of Syria, and they're kind of like a lot of the HTS camps. And so they go through HTS's pipeline, and then they're deployed essentially from Syria by HTS. So it's really interesting. There's a number of senior leaders at the top, and the plot is approved by Al-Qaeda Shura and ISIS Shura. We've never had a plot like this ever to exist.